Hello my friends, welcome to this tier list video to patch 26.16 for the AD carry role. I will put down all the champions that are in my opinion something like Z tier, S blind, counter and so on. I will try to give as much information as possible. Who am I to tell you though? I was a full-time pro player, reached challenger the past 5 seasons, and now let's go straight into the video. If you're also interested making like tier lists, this is the site from LS Drafting. You can just check it out, it's completely for free, really nice site. So for this patch we kinda need to look at the patch notes because the AD carries got a lot of magic resist basically for free, so that mages don't get that popular or like will not be that popular in the future anymore. And Tristana is a champion that was already good into mages, but she got 5 magic resists, which is like really insane for her. So for me, Tristana also as a blind, as I said, this is only SoloQ tier list, is really good. The only bad matchups that are kinda there for Tristana, I would say, is currently Draven. So maybe if you're going into SoloQ and you have the ban open, then you can just get Draven out. Aside from that, also Yuntal got buffed, and that is probably the best item on Tristana, and she was also using it before, so the champion got way better. Then let's go straight down to S tier. In S blind we have Zeri. In my opinion it's the same. Hurricane got buffed, Yuntal's got buffed, and Zeri is a champion that has a lot of mobility in solo queue. You can basically play this champion into any sort of matchups. Of course there are like a few hard ones like Tristana, Draven, stuff like this, but it's still always survivable for you and you will be really useful later on in the game. Then one of my favorite champions, actually Jinx, it's same argument again. Yuntal got buffed and Hurricane got buffed, and this champion has a really easy win condition every single time, so the moment you're basically getting a reset, you can always kind of carry games or like take them over. Another blind pick that people actually underestimate is actually Jhin. Jhin is a champion that is often played in pro play, and in my opinion, this champion can basically neutralize every single lane, and you will always find impact because you have your W, you can open mid lane for example out of base after pushing a wave and somehow find impact. Same thing for your ultimate. Another good blind pick is Caitlyn. Caitlyn struggles a bit into like lower range mages like Ziggs for example, but also against champions like Tristana, Zeri, she will have a really good time. Then let's go straight into counter picks, and counter picks in S tier in my opinion is sivir. When the enemies play mages for example, I always like picking sivir simply because of the spell shield, but also because of the pushing power that you have in the early and also like the later the game goes. Then another important counter pick, xayah. Xayah is really insane into any hard engaged team comps or something that's low range, like let's say the enemies have, I don't know, like a Vi or Galio Camille combination, something like this, then that Xayah usually gets pretty insane. Another counter pick that is not played that often is Kai'Sa in my opinion. There's also this AP build right now that you can build, so even into higher range comps, in my opinion, you will always be fine by buying static like in the early game. But obviously the best thing for Kai'Sa is if something goes in or the enemies are kind of low range / you have something that goes in like Vi yourself or maybe a Nautilus support, Leona, stuff like this. Another counter is Yasuo. In my opinion, Yasuo is really broken on bot lane. This champion needs a lot of skill though, especially when playing it on AD carry. I don't think a lot of AD carry mains have that many games on Yasuo, but if you execute this champion correct on bot lane, then he is absolutely insane. In my opinion, Twitch is also a good champion, but Twitch is like a bit more unique. I think Twitch is good if the enemies actually have a low mobile AD carry, like aphelios or jinx for example, because then you always get windows where you can actually ultimate him down, especially on mid waves. But there will probably be a really low amount of cases where you can pick AD carry that late, so that Twitch actually gets value. Then let's talk about the mages real quick. In my opinion, Seraphine is a really good counter pick champion, especially if the enemies have nothing to like really engage you on bot lane. But if the enemies have Tristana for example, then your champ gets like really bad in the early game. But if you have a lot of bruisers that you can buff, you can provide CC, then Seraphine is actually a really good champion. Also in my opinion, I tried a lot of Xerath games and into like more mobile champions that again cannot jump on you. Xerath is actually a super nice champion because you always start outranging the enemy team comp simply by his kit. Also I'm not too sure about the power of AP champs right now, or like mages in bot lane, because of all these AD carries having the magic resist buffs, so I will need like a few more 50, 100 games to see if it's like actually changing something or if mages will still be that good. Because in competitive for example, Xerath, Victor and Syndra are champions that are often played, but simply because we can flex them into mid lane. So then it gives a draft advantage, but in solo queue, this is usually not possible. Then let's finish off with our mages. I put Karthus in S blind here, but he's not really a mage. He's more of a chaotic solo queue champion that you can like kinda always go if you have something that you can actually win lane with and if you're good on the champion. Following it up with Ziggs, I think Ziggs is a 8-tier champion. He's not that insane in solo queue because like most of the time he can just clear waves and that's kinda it. And then we're still having Syndra. I think Syndra AD carry is more of a champion that is actually playable because you have insane scaling. And then we still have Victor, but in my opinion, the problem with Victor is if you're playing into any sort of long-range champions and you cannot flex it mid lane, the champion simply becomes pretty useless. Then let's keep sticking to the A tier list. In my opinion here we have Ezreal. I think Ezreal dropped off simply because the crit AD carries got buffed a lot and Ezreal's win rate also seems to be pretty low, which I don't really care about. But usually when the crit items are getting buffed, then Ezreal always loses some percent of win rate and the other AD carries are simply getting better. Another AD carry that is really underrated, in my opinion, is Lucian, because you can combine Lucian with Melio, but you can combine Lucian also with like any sort of engage or disruptive champion. So for example, with Leona, if you want to engage champion, or like a Braum, like a Taric, if you want something disruptive into enemy engage. Then there's Yunara. Yunara, in my opinion, is really good if you have the correct combinations with her. So, for example, Yunara Lulu, in my opinion, still really good, but something that is not really like reproducible in solo queue. If you're playing duo queue and you're a Yunara player and your support plays Lulu, I think it's a really good combination. Aphelios, in my opinion, is simply a competitive champion. I think this champion can be really good if you're really insane on him, but you're missing a lot of mobility when it comes onto your solo queue games. So I would not advise you to play this champion or learn him, because his skill ceiling is also extremely high and you need to be so much better on Aphelios than, for example, if you would just lock in Jinx, because on Jinx you always have this free win condition, right? But in my opinion, Aphelios is a super nice champion, but not that good right now. Ashe is also a tier champion. Maybe Ashe would actually be a S tier champion, because this champion simply provides you vision, so you get a lot of info about the enemy jungle pathing, for example, but also mid into late game, and you always have tools, and tools are really broken if you have them yourselves as AD carry. Then we're still having Draven. I think Draven in A tier is fine, but in my opinion, maybe he is more use of like as a counter pick, because Draven is, for example, really good into like something like Jhin blind or something like Zeri blind, and there are not a lot of AD carry players that play this because his other matchups are not that nice. But if you're like a OTP, for example, I would say you can just blind this champion in solo queue. Then we're having Misfortune. I simply put Misfortune B tier because it's kind of the same thing as Aphelios when it comes down to the mobility part, but also here with Misfortune, if you have any sort of CC that you can follow up on, then this champion can actually have a lot of value. Vayne, in my opinion, is a C tier champion. This champion is simply like completely outdated when it comes down to bot lane, and like you have no sort of wave clear, so pushing out waves is like horrible. I only see a cases like kind of when the enemies have like super low range team comp, or even play something like Yasuo or any melee champion on AD carry, then Vayne can get really good, but even then I would still advise you guys to play just play Kaiser. Then there's Corki. Corki actually got a lot of buffs. I would just put this guy down in A tier. He struggles into like lower range shit, but also into like Caitlyn matchups, for example, but also Jinx, something that is high range and he cannot really go on to. He struggles with, but aside from that, super solid right now and really nice to play. Samira, I think, is a bit underrated in solo queue, but this champion is so bad when the enemies have like any sort of CC, like let's say you look in Leona and the enemies just pick Alistar, just pick Leona or something, you know, and they just hold down their CC spells in team fights, then the game immediately becomes completely unplayable for you if the enemy is actually a good player. Kalista, in my opinion, is a champion where you need a good pairing. If you're a good Kalista player, like with Renata, for example, I think this champion can be really good, but if not, it's simply a B tier champion and struggles into any sort of range, and if not, really stomping in lane. Then Varus, I think Varus is like kind of on a rising tree right now. There are a lot of people that play this static build, but also with lethalities, simply because you can get 10 stacks in your rune. I'm not too sure how good it is, but for now I will just put him into B tier. Then there's Smolder. Sadly, Smolder is like not getting anything from the AD carry buffs, or rather like the Yuntal and Hurricane buffs, so this champion is still in C tier, like he's not really playable, way too weak in lane. Then we have kog'maw. I think kog'maw is B tier. I think there are a lot of angles where you can actually play kog'maw, and he's a good AP champion on bot lane, but on AD carry, I think you can just pick something else and you will have more fun playing it, honestly. Then Xayah got hit by a lot of nerfs, so this champion is not really that playable on AD carry right now. And that's kind of it for the tier list. I put down Vladimir in the counter tier list because I think Vladimir is not really a mage champion, but more of like a assassin healing champion, or however you want to call it. And I think he's really insane if the enemies pick something low range, or even go like Zeri or something where you get free scaling. Feel free to tell me your thoughts in the comment if you found this helpful. Feel free to check out my coaching Discord, give this video a like, and see you next time. Have a good one. Bye bye.